classroom, it is your responsibility as a teacher to make a learning environment that is fit to suit all of your students' needs when it comes to an education. Because all children learn and behave differently due to different learning abilities as well as disabilities that they possess, it is only right and your job to provide each student with an education that gives them the same chances of success as others. This technique is called differentiation in the education world and is a very important part of your job as a teacher. When differentiating, teachers should keep in mind the 4 classroom elements that can be used to differentiate with. These are content, process, products, and the learning environment. You will learn that differentiation most of the times will not only benefit one child, but the majority of your classroom. Let's take a look at how Mrs. Jones used differentiation in her first grade classroom to help 3 of her students learn the material best. In class today, Mrs. Jones in her classroom will be conducting a science experiment. She splits her classroom into groups of 3 to 4 children, and each group is given a bin of water and 10 small objects. The children put the first 5 objects in one at a time into the water bin and observe what happens, jotting notes in their notebooks. They are then asked to make predictions about the remaining 5 objects that resemble the first 5 and to predict whether the object will float or sink, and give an explanation. Mrs. Jones knows right away that she has 3 students that she believes will need and will benefit from a differentiated version of this lesson plan. The first student is Carly. Carly is a very bright girl but has autism. Because of this, Mrs. Jones knows that working in a group will be difficult for Carly as she doesn't do very well in social scenarios when she doesn't have control over what each person is responsible for. Also, Mrs. Jones knows that Carly struggles when the outcome she wants to see doesn't happen. This can get in the way of the experiment if she thinks something will float actually sinks. Because of this, Mrs. Jones has made 2 accommodations for her lesson plan. The first is to assign each person a number that they will keep throughout the experiment. This number gives each student a specific role in the experiment. This will make the assignments fairer and make Carly understand that it is random and that she gets to have consistency in the number she receives. The second accommodation she makes is to give examples before they begin of how students should learn from what they see happen in the first 5 objects and how to predict based on materials of the previous. This will hopefully help Carly make informed predictions that will help her be more successful and less likely to become upset. Through these efforts, Mrs. Jones has differentiated her lesson through the process she offers. The next student Mrs. Jones considers is Jonathan. Jonathan has ADHD. Because of this, Mrs. Jones knows that he typically has a difficult time finishing his tasks and getting distracted easily. This means that Mrs. Jones needs to make this assignment feel important and exciting for Jonathan. She does this by limiting the distractions around the room, such as music, loud noises, and other activities, and also make sure that all 10 items, while similar, are different so that the assignment doesn't feel repetitive and boring for Jonathan. By changing the way her classroom works and feels, Mrs. Jones differentiated her learning environment to help Jonathan. The third student that Mrs. Jones takes into account is Max. Max has a hearing impairment that makes it hard for him to always understand the assignments that are given. Because Mrs. Jones knows this, she has learned that Max responds best in a class when he is giving printed versions of the assignment and is never just given verbal instructions. By these efforts, she has differentiated through the products that Max receives. Another great tool that educators can use to help their students with disabilities is to collaborate and have a team of people that know the child and what is best for them. This can include the general educator, special educator, principal, and parent, or sometimes more people can be involved. Getting multiple views and ideas of how to best educate and help your students will always help you be more successful. This can be established through the RTI tier system that gives teachers guidelines of how to appropriately approach teaching all of your students. Depending on the level of the disability, the students should be given a specific constructed education from the 3-tier system. Professional learning communities are also very helpful connections that teachers have available to collaborate and determine the best outcomes for their students. In our classrooms, we are faced with a group of students that vary immensely in strength, disabilities, and needs. Differentiation is an amazing way to give your students the best education possible. We do not all learn the same, nor should we. This means that as an educator, we are responsible to teach in different ways to effectively teach all of our students. Through differentiation, we are able to provide an amazing education for each student.